They say your home is your castle. You buy it, you pay the mortgage, you do the maintenance, and you believe it's yours to live in and pass down to your children. But for millions of Americans living under homeowners associations, better known as HOAs, that belief can be shattered overnight. Because buried in those community rulebooks are rules so strict, so unexpected, that breaking just one could cost you everything. Not just a fine, not just a nasty letter. I'm talking about eviction, losing your house entirely. Now the thought of eviction sounds extreme, doesn't it? You probably imagine it only happens to people who never pay their bills, or squatters refusing to leave a rental. But the reality is harsher. HOAs in many states hold powers that rival local governments. They can slap liens on your property, drag you into court, and in the right circumstances, strip you of ownership. And here's the part that makes it even scarier. Most homeowners have no idea which rules put them at risk until it's too late. Picture this. A family moves into what looks like a peaceful suburban neighborhood. Freshly painted houses, neat lawns, neighbors waving across driveways. They think they've made it, but a few months later, a letter arrives. It says they've broken Rule 14B, no unapproved exterior modifications. Their crime? Painting their shutters navy blue instead of the board-approved shade of slate gray. The HOA demands they repaint within 10 days. The family ignores it, thinking it's ridiculous. Then comes the second letter, this time with a fine attached. $100 a week, compounding. Before they know it, they owe thousands, and the HOA has the leverage to place a lien. From there, foreclosure isn't far behind. Or because of a paint color. That may sound like an exaggeration, but stories like these appear in court records across the country. And it doesn't stop at paint. Driveway cracks, holiday decorations, even the type of car you park outside your home. Each can be the spark that lights a financial firestorm. In this story, we're going to pull back the curtain on 7 of the most shocking HOA rules that can, and have led to homeowners being forced out. You may think you're safe because you always pay dues on time. But as you'll see, the real danger isn't just the bills you know. It's the rules you don't. And I guarantee by the time we get to number 4, you'll understand why thousands of homeowners say living under an HOA feels like living under a private government. Before we dive into the first rule, let's pause for a moment. Why do HOAs exist in the first place? Originally, they were sold as a way to protect property values. The idea was simple. Keep everyone's lawns trimmed, keep the houses uniform, and your neighborhood will stay desirable. Buyers would feel secure knowing their investment wouldn't be ruined by one careless neighbor turning their front yard into a junkyard. On paper, it sounds reasonable. But the reality is that power tends to grow beyond its purpose. Rules multiply, fines increase, and enforcement becomes less about community spirit and more about revenue streams. What starts as neighborhood order turns into neighborhood control, and that's the backdrop for the 7 rules I'm about to reveal. These aren't just hypothetical. They're drawn from real HOA documents, court disputes, and homeowner testimonies. Each one illustrates how something seemingly small can spiral into something devastating. The first rule is about landscaping. You might think of your front yard as an extension of your home, a place where you can plant what you like and mow when you choose. But many HOAs dictate the exact grass height, the number of bushes, even the color of mulch. Miss a deadline on trimming, let weeds creep too high, or install the wrong species of flower, and you can face fines that escalate quickly. Some homeowners, especially elderly ones who couldn't maintain their yards due to illness, have found themselves in foreclosure proceedings because the fines piled up while they were in the hospital. Imagine coming home from cancer treatment to find your HOA has filed a lien on your house over grass. It's not just cruel, it's real, documented, and it happens more often than you'd believe. But let's not stop there. Rule 2, even more shocking, involves vehicles. Many HOAs restrict what can be parked in driveways. Work trucks, RVs, boats, or even cars deemed unsightly by the board can trigger penalties. In one notorious case, a homeowner who drove a pickup truck, his only vehicle, which he needed for work, was told he could no longer park it at his own house overnight. He refused because where else could he put it? The fines stacked up, he contested them, and the legal fees became unbearable. Eventually, he was forced to sell his home under pressure. Just think about that. Losing the roof over your head because of the car you drive. Now, if you're shaking your head already, hold on. Because the third rule is about holiday decorations. Yes, those lights and lawn ornaments you put up to celebrate the season could cost you dearly. HOAs often have strict calendars, when decorations can go up, when they must come down, and what kind are permissible. One family in Texas was fined daily for leaving Halloween pumpkins on their porch too long. They ignored the warnings, thinking it was absurd. But the daily fines snowballed. The HOA pursued a lien, and they ended up in court. Imagine explaining to a judge that you might lose your home over a carved pumpkin. By now, you're seeing the pattern. Small rules, strict enforcement, financial punishment, and each story feels a little crazier than the last. But all of them share a common thread. Once the fines and fees build up, the HOA's legal leverage kicks in. And that's where eviction comes into play. But remember how I said number 4 is the one most homeowners don't know? We're almost there. And it's the most dangerous of all, because it doesn't rely on your lawn, your truck, or your decorations. It's buried in financial clauses you probably skimmed when you signed the paperwork. It's the rule that could strike even if you've never broken a visible covenant. And it's the one that has caught thousands of homeowners off guard. We'll get to that in just a moment. But first, take a breath and think about what you've heard so far. Landscaping, vehicles, holiday decor, harmless choices, right? Yet under HOA control, they can transform into life-altering consequences. And if these first 3 sound harsh, number 4 is the silent killer. Rule number 4 is the one that blindsides even the most responsible homeowners. It's not about paint or plants, not about what's visible to your neighbors at all. It's about missed dues and hidden fees. On the surface, that sounds simple. You pay your HOA dues on time, you're fine. But here's where the danger creeps in. Many associations bury clauses in their agreements that allow them to tack on administrative charges, late penalties, and legal fees in ways that balloon shockingly fast. Miss a payment by a few days, and suddenly you're hit with interest, processing costs, and collection expenses. Now imagine this. You go on vacation, your mail piles up, and you miss a notice. Or maybe you're recovering from surgery, and you don't realize a payment was misapplied. By the time you discover the error, your $200 quarterly dues have snowballed into $1,500 with fees. You call, you argue, you try to explain, but the HOA board simply points to the contract. From there, it only takes a few months before they can record a lien. And here's the kicker. In many states, HOA liens take priority over your mortgage. That means your bank could watch helplessly while your HOA forecloses on your house, sometimes over a few $100s. That's why this rule is so dangerous. Because even diligent homeowners can fall victim. You could have your lawn pristine, your shutters the exact right shade, your decorations timed perfectly, and still lose your home because of one overlooked envelope. And HOAs know this. Some even lean on it as a business model. Fines and fees become revenue streams, and homeowners become targets instead of neighbors. There's a case in Nevada where an elderly woman on a fixed income missed a payment while she was in the hospital. The HOA tacked on fines, then attorney's fees, then collection charges. By the time her daughter found out, the home was being auctioned. The daughter begged the board for leniency, offering to pay the original balance immediately. But the board refused, saying the foreclosure process had already started. That house sold for pennies on the dollar, and the family lost everything, over a mistake that could have been resolved with a single phone call. So if you thought the first 3 rules were absurd, rule number 4 is terrifying. It's invisible. It strikes without warning. And once it starts, it's nearly impossible to stop without expensive legal help. Now, as we move on, the 5th rule may seem more cosmetic, but don't underestimate its bite. It's about home modifications and repairs. You'd think fixing up your property would always be a positive thing, repairing a roof, building a deck, or adding a ramp for accessibility. But many HOAs require prior approval for even the smallest exterior changes. That means if you replace a window without the right form, you can be fined. Put up a shed for your tools? Fine. Add solar panels? Fine. Even safety improvements like a handrail or wheelchair ramp can spark disputes if you didn't run it through the board first. There's a notorious case in Florida where a veteran installed a ramp so his disabled wife could safely enter their home. The HOA fined him daily, claiming he hadn't submitted the correct request. He argued that federal disability law gave him the right, but the legal battle dragged on. The stress alone nearly broke the couple. Can you imagine being punished for trying to care for your spouse? The sixth rule is even more insidious because it creeps into your daily life. It's about behavior and noise restrictions. Many HOAs regulate what you can and cannot do in your own home. Quiet hours, pet restrictions, even the number of guests you can host. One family faced fines because their teenage son practiced drums in the garage after school. Another homeowner was penalized for letting her sister stay with her for more than 2 weeks, violating a rule against long-term guests. These aren't extreme outliers. They're written into HOA covenants all across the country. And the punishments escalate just like with landscaping or dues. What starts as a warning becomes a fine, then a lien, then the threat of eviction. And here's something that should make every homeowner pause. Once an HOA board labels your household a nuisance, they have broad powers to act. That label can be used to justify lawsuits, forced compliance orders, and, in some cases, foreclosure. It's like having your neighbor's complaints weaponized into legal authority. Finally, we arrive at the seventh rule, the one that ties all of this together: selective enforcement. On paper, HOAs claim to apply rules equally, but in reality, enforcement often depends on who you are, how much power you have, or how well you get along with the board. One family might be fined for an overgrown bush while another is ignored. A board member's truck might be grandfathered in while a new residence is penalized. Selective enforcement not only breeds resentment, but it also creates legal chaos. Because if you're the unlucky one singled out, you carry the burden while others skate free. And once you're on the board's radar, every move you make is scrutinized. That kind of pressure wears homeowners down until they either comply at great cost or leave. So let's recap what we've uncovered. Landscaping rules, vehicle restrictions, holiday decorations, dues and hidden fees, unapproved modifications, noise and guest limits, and selective enforcement. 7 seemingly small categories of rules that, when enforced to the fullest extent, can strip you of your home. Each one is a trapdoor, waiting for the wrong step. And each one has real stories attached, of families who thought they were safe, only to lose everything. Now you might be wondering, why do people still move into HOA communities if the risks are so high? The answer comes down to appearances. HOAs promise order, cleanliness, higher property values. They show glossy brochures with manicured lawns, sparkling pools, and smiling neighbors. And to many buyers, that promise outweighs the fine print, until the fine print becomes the nightmare. But here's where things get even more interesting. The real danger isn't just the rules themselves. It's the system that enforces them. Boards made up of neighbors wielding unchecked power. Management companies profiting from fines. Lawyers on retainer ready to turn disputes into billable hours. Once you understand that, you see the rules for what they really are. Tools in a larger machine designed to control, to extract, and sometimes to ruin. And as we go deeper into this story, we'll explore not just the rules, but the psychology of HOAs, the way power changes people, the way communities fracture under the weight of control. Because knowing the rules is only half the battle. Surviving them requires understanding the game behind them. When you step back and look at those 7 rules, they seem almost petty at first glance. Grass height, truck parking, pumpkins on the porch. But what makes them terrifying is not their content, it's their enforcement. Because in the hands of an HOA board, those rules become leverage, and leverage becomes a weapon. Think of it like this. Every rule is a tool in a toolbox. A fine is a hammer. A lien is a crowbar. Selective enforcement is a scalpel. Each is small on its own, but together they create a legal arsenal aimed squarely at the homeowner. And here's the unsettling part. Once you're in conflict with your HOA, those tools aren't used sparingly. They're used relentlessly because the system incentivizes escalation. The more fines, the more revenue. The more disputes, the more attorney's fees. And every fee, every charge, is ultimately billed to you. Take the story of James, a retired firefighter who bought a modest home in a planned community in Arizona. James had spent his career running into burning buildings, saving strangers, putting his life on the line. All he wanted in retirement was peace. But one spring, his lawn irrigation system broke while he was visiting his grandchildren. By the time he returned, the grass had browned, weeds had popped up, and a violation letter was waiting. He fixed the problem immediately, reseeded, and thought that was the end. But the HOA board wasn't satisfied. They claimed his delayed response hurt community aesthetics and levied a fine. James refused to pay out a principal. That's when the fines doubled, then tripled, then came the lien notice. Within months, James, the man who had spent a lifetime serving his city, was fighting foreclosure over a patch of grass. Or consider Maria, a single mother in North Carolina. She worked 2 jobs, barely keeping up with her HOA dues. One winter, her car broke down and she couldn't pay on time. The HOA immediately added late fees, then collection charges. Maria scraped together what she thought was the balance and mailed a check. But the management company claimed it was short by $37. That $37 ballooned into hundreds in legal correspondence fees. When Maria begged for leniency, the board told her their hands were tied. They weren't. They simply chose not to help. By the time Maria found legal aid, the foreclosure process had already begun. Imagine working double shifts, just trying to survive, only to have your house stripped away for less than the cost of a utility bill. These stories are not outliers. They're warnings. They show how rules, written under the guise of community standards, are twisted into profit engines. And what makes them especially brutal is that most homeowners never see it coming. The glossy brochures never mention foreclosure. The smiling realtor never says, by the way, miss a $100 payment and you could lose your house. Instead, they sell the dream of security while hiding the reality of control. But how does this enforcement actually work? Let's break it down. It starts with a violation notice. Simple, direct, often written in language that sounds almost polite. Please correct the issue within 10 days to avoid further action. Most people comply. But if you don't, or if you can't, the HOA escalates. The next letter carries a fine, then another, then a notice of legal fees. And here's where the trap closes. Many contracts allow the HOA to bill homeowners for the cost of enforcing rules. That means every letter from their lawyer, every hour of management company time, every court filing, they all get added to your tab. You're not just paying your fine. You're paying their army. That's how a $50 dispute becomes a $5,000 debt. That's how neighbors become adversaries, and how families end up in foreclosure court over details that seem laughable on paper. And don't think selective enforcement is rare. In fact, it's one of the most common complaints. Boards often have favorites. Maybe it's a neighbor who's been on the street for 20 years. Maybe it's a friend of a board member. Maybe it's just someone who doesn't rock the boat. Those people get warnings. They get grace periods. They get overlooked. Meanwhile, the outspoken homeowner who questions dues, increases, or challenges board decisions, they get the book thrown at them. Suddenly, every crack in their driveway, every toy left in the yard, every minor infraction becomes a fine. It's less about rules, more about punishment. And selective punishment is the fastest way to break someone's spirit. Psychologically, this is where the true power of HOAs lies. It's not just about money. It's about pressure, about making life so uncomfortable that resisting feels impossible. Some homeowners cave, paying whatever it takes to make the harassment stop. Others move, selling at a loss just to escape. And the HOA, they win either way. They collect money, or they get rid of a problem neighbor. Now pause and think about what this does to the sense of community. Neighborhoods are supposed to be places of connection, safety, belonging. But under a hostile HOA, they become places of suspicion and fear. Neighbors watch each other, waiting for violations. Boards pit residents against one another. And the very thing HOAs claim to protect, property values, is corroded by toxic mistrust. Because who wants to buy into a community where people lose their homes over grass, trucks, or decorations? Still, despite the horror stories, HOAs continue to grow. Millions of Americans live under them. Why? Because the alternative is often no alternative at all. Developers build entire neighborhoods under mandatory associations. Buyers rarely read the covenants before signing. By the time they realize what they've agreed to, it's too late. They're trapped in a private legal system that doesn't play by the same rules as government. This is why homeowners describe HOAs as the government you didn't vote. But they have powers similar to municipalities, fines, liens, foreclosures, but without the accountability of elections, transparency, or public oversight. A handful of board members, sometimes just 3 or 4 people, can dictate the lives of hundreds of families. And if you think democracy always wins out, remember, board elections often have dismal turnout. A small, organized clique can seize control and hold it for years. Once in power, they control not just the rules, but the finances, the contracts, and the lawyers. That's the bigger picture many homeowners miss until it's too late. The rules aren't just about lawns, cars, or dues. They're about control enforced by money, fear, and law. And the victims aren't always the careless or the defiant. Sometimes they're the diligent, the vulnerable, the elderly, the single parents. The veterans, people who simply stumbled once and never recovered. As we move forward, we'll step even deeper into this system. Because understanding the rules is one thing, understanding the consequences of breaking them is another. But to truly protect yourself, you need to see how HOAs operate from the inside, the motivations of the boards, the profit incentives of management companies, and the traps that ensnare homeowners before they even realize they're in danger. To understand why HOAs act the way they do, you have to look beneath the surface. On paper, they're non-profit corporations meant to serve the community. In reality, they often function more like private fiefdoms, where a handful of individuals wield disproportionate influence, and outside companies profit handsomely from homeowner misery. Start with the board. Most HOA boards are made up of volunteers, neighbors, retirees, busy parents, people with limited training in law or finance. That sounds innocent enough, until you realize these same volunteers are given extraordinary authority. They can issue fines, hire attorneys, place liens, and foreclose, all without the checks and balances we take for granted in public government. There's no city council chamber where residents can stand up and demand answers. There's no investigative journalist shining a light on shady practices. In many HOAs, the board operates in the shadows, with only minimal oversight from homeowners who rarely attend meetings. This vacuum of accountability creates opportunity. Sometimes it's simply the opportunity for pettiness, using rules to settle grudges or control neighbors. Other times it's financial. Contracts for landscaping, security, pool maintenance, or roofing can be worth tens of thousands of dollars. A board that plays favorites can steer those contracts to friends, relatives, or companies that return the favor with perks. Is it illegal? Sometimes. But often it's just unethical. And in the meantime, homeowners foot the bill. Now add the role of management companies. These firms are the hidden power players in the HOA world. Boards often rely on them to handle enforcement, billing, and day-to-day operations. And here's where the conflict of interest becomes glaring. Management companies don't make money by keeping peace. They make money through fees, late fees, violation fees, collection fees. The more conflict, the more income. That's why they're quick to escalate minor disputes into major battles. From their perspective, every angry letter and every legal filing is just another line item on an invoice. And because most homeowners don't realize these companies are hired guns, they mistake the management firm for the HOA itself, leaving the real decision-makers shielded from backlash. This financial structure explains why compassion is rare in HOA enforcement. To a board or management company, leniency equals lost revenue. Strict enforcement, by contrast, is profitable. Consider this: a $50 fine that escalates into a $500 dispute and eventually a $5,000 legal bill is a win for the system, even if it ruins a family. There's no incentive to resolve things quickly or fairly. The incentives are stacked toward dragging conflicts out and squeezing every possible dollar. But money isn't the only motivator. Power plays just as big a role. For some board members, enforcing rules is less about revenue and more about control. It's the rush of authority, the satisfaction of making neighbors bend to their will. This is where the psychology of HOAs becomes chilling. Imagine a person who's never held real authority suddenly realizing they can dictate what cars people drive, what plants they grow, even what curtains they hang. It can be intoxicating. And when challenged, instead of backing down, many double down, issuing more fines, enforcing more rules, proving to themselves and others that they're in charge. This dynamic explains why HOAs often clash hardest with outspoken homeowners. The system views dissent not as healthy debate, but as rebellion, and rebellion must be crushed. That's why homeowners who attend meetings and ask tough questions often find themselves targeted for violations. Suddenly, their trash cans are being monitored, their landscaping is out of compliance, their siding is in need of repair. It's not coincidence. It's retaliation disguised as rule enforcement. For the average homeowner, this dynamic is disorienting. People move into HOA communities believing they're joining a neighborhood, not signing up for a political battleground. They expect cooperation, not intimidation. When the reality hits, it feels less like community and more like captivity. And the psychological toll is significant. Stress rises. Neighbors stop trusting each other. Families live in constant fear of the next letter or fine. It turns the place that's supposed to be your refuge, your home, into a source of anxiety. Yet despite all this, HOAs thrive. Why? Because they're built into the modern housing market. Developers love them because they shift costs onto homeowners. Municipalities love them because they provide services, like road maintenance and snow removal, that local governments no longer have to fund. Realtors love them because they can advertise neat, safe, well-maintained communities. Everyone up the chain benefits, except the homeowners who bear the weight of the system. That's the trap. By the time you realize how the machine works, you're already in it, and getting out isn't easy. Selling may not be an option if your property is devalued by conflicts. Challenging the board in court is expensive. Rallying neighbors is difficult when fear and apathy dominate. The deck is stacked, and it's stacked intentionally. But here's what makes this topic so urgent. Knowledge is power. Most homeowners don't know how HOAs function until they've already been targeted. By then, the damage is done. But if you understand the structure, the incentives, the psychology, the financial motivations, you can see the warning signs earlier. You can recognize when a board is crossing the line. You can anticipate when a management company is exploiting fees. And most importantly, you can prepare defenses before the system corners you. Because at the end of the day, what's at stake isn't just money. It's dignity. It's security. It's the right to live in your own home without constant fear. And in a country where home ownership is supposed to represent freedom and stability, nothing feels more un-American than losing your house over weeds or paint colors. That's the reality most people never see until it's too late. The rules you signed at closing weren't guidelines. They were weapons waiting to be used. The board members you thought were neighbors were also judges and enforcers. The management company you mistook for a neutral administrator was profiting from every misstep. And once the machinery starts turning, it doesn't stop until someone is broken. Which raises the question, how do you fight back? How do ordinary homeowners protect themselves in a system designed to overpower them? That's where we're headed next. Because exposing the problem is only the first step. The real challenge, and the real opportunity, lies in understanding the tools homeowners have, the mistakes they must avoid, and the strategies that can turn the tables, even in the most hostile HOA environments. By now you've seen how HOA rules, though seemingly harmless, can spiral into financial traps, retaliation, and even foreclosure. You've seen how boards and management companies wield power with little accountability, and how everyday families become casualties in a system that often feels rigged. But knowledge alone isn't enough. What matters most is how you use that knowledge to protect yourself and, when necessary, push back. The first line of defense is awareness. Most homeowners get blindsided because they don't know the governing documents, the CC&Rs, bylaws, and rules that they signed when buying their property. These documents are often dense, legalistic, and intentionally confusing. But buried inside them are the very weapons that can be used against you. If you live in an HOA, your strongest move is to read and understand those documents before trouble starts. Know what the board can do. Know what they can't. Know the deadlines for violations, the appeal processes, and the quorum requirements for board meetings. In short, arm yourself with the rulebook, because that's the battlefield. Next comes vigilance. HOAs thrive when homeowners are apathetic. They rely on low turnout at meetings, poor attendance at elections, and silence in the face of bad behavior. By showing up consistently, you break that cycle. Attend meetings, ask questions, request financial reports, document everything. The more visible and engaged you are, the harder it is for a board to target you in secret. Bullies prefer shadows. Shine a light and suddenly they're on the defensive. But what if you've already been targeted? What if the violation letters are piling up, the fines are mounting, and the pressure feels unbearable? That's where strategy comes in. The worst mistake homeowners make is ignoring the letters, assuming the problem will go away. It won't. Silence is treated as guilt, and in the absence of a response, boards escalate quickly. Instead, respond politely, firmly, and in writing. Challenge inaccuracies. Request evidence. Demand records. This creates a paper trail, one that may become vital if things reach court, and don't underestimate the power of allies. Too often, homeowners suffer in isolation, believing they're the only ones under fire. In reality, many neighbors share the same frustrations. Talk to them. Compare notes, organize. One voice is easy to dismiss. 10 voices are harder. 50 voices can change elections, recall board members, and reshape the culture of an entire community. Remember, boards derive their power from the homeowners themselves. The same system that allows abuse also allows reform, if enough people care enough to act. Still, there are times when internal efforts aren't enough. That's when legal help becomes critical. Many states have statutes regulating HOAs, though boards rarely advertise them. A local attorney who specializes in property law can point out when boards overstep their authority, when fines exceed statutory limits, or when foreclosure threats violate due process. Legal intervention can be expensive, but so is losing your home. Sometimes it's the only viable shield. And here's a truth many don't realize. Media attention is a powerful weapon. HOAs hate bad press. Local news outlets often cover stories of homeowners being harassed or threatened with foreclosure. Social media amplifies those stories, spreading them far beyond the neighborhood. Boards that are unshaken by letters and lawsuits sometimes crumble when their reputations are at stake. If you're facing an unjust battle, consider going public. Shine that light not just in meetings, but across the entire community. For those willing to think longer term, there's another more radical path. Run for the board yourself. Yes, the very system that feels oppressive can be changed from within. By electing fair, transparent, homeowner-first candidates, communities can rewrite rules, rein in management companies, and restore balance. It's not easy. Entrenched boards resist change. But it's one of the few ways to truly fix the system instead of just surviving it. Underlying all of this is one principle. Don't let the HOA define the terms of the fight. They want you reactive, isolated, and overwhelmed. Instead, be proactive, connected, and prepared. Expect violations and have responses ready. Expect fines and know your appeal rights. Expect intimidation and counter with documentation and alliances. The system may be stacked, but it's not unbreakable. With persistence and knowledge, homeowners can and do win. And that brings us to the deeper question. What does victory look like? For some, it's simply surviving, keeping their home, paying off the fines, and moving forward. For others, it's reclaiming dignity, standing up to bullies, refusing to be cowed. For the boldest, it's reform, building a community where neighbors actually look out for one another, where rules serve people, not the other way around. Each victory matters. Each win chips away at a culture that has gone unchecked for too long. If you're listening to this, chances are you're either in an HOA now, considering one, or simply curious about how these private governments work. Wherever you fall, remember this: awareness is your greatest asset. Don't buy blind. Don't live blind. Don't assume the smiling realtor or the glossy brochure tells the whole story. Ask questions. Read documents. Talk to current residents. Protect yourself before you sign, not after you're trapped. And if you're already inside the system, know that you're not alone. Across the country, millions of homeowners are in the same battle. Some win quietly. Others lose dramatically. But every story matters. Every voice raised chips away at the myth that HOAs are harmless neighborhood associations. They're not. They're powerful, private governments, and like all governments, they require accountability. So the next time you see a letter in your mailbox, don't just see ink on paper. See it for what it is: a test of will, a flex of power, a challenge. And remember, you have choices. You can pay. You can fight. You can organize. You can reform. What you cannot do is ignore it, because ignoring is surrender. Your home is more than 4 walls and a roof. It's safety. It's family. It's identity. And no board, no management company, no stack of fines should be able to take that away without a fight. The rules may be written against you, but the story isn't finished. Not if you refuse to let it end there.